It was about a $2.2 million cash loss. It was that moment in my life that was the TSN turning point, because it's what humbled me. So that next handshake that I did, that didn't make me $1 million. It unlocked the door to make me millions of dollars. And the reason why I do this is because that type of wealth for me is where I'm building my legacy. The best way to preserve your money is definitely through real estate. I will debate against anybody that tells you that there's another safe vehicle.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you doing, sir, today?
Good morning, Savan. We finally made it. Partaking in
Yes, sir.
a little bit of a struggle from my end trying to get on this call with you because of how busy we've been lately. I mean, we're blessed to have an active market, and we're blessed to be able to help other people grow and scale their business as well. So all things that are occupying us are healthy and good. I'd love to thank you for the opportunity today to be on this call with you. I'm just excited to see what you got in store and how I can help you and service your clients as well.
Yeah, for sure. We get together because we have talked in the past, we have done a deal together, and I just wanted to see if you can share a little bit about the experience you have. So maybe first we can start there. What has been your journey in real estate so far, and what's your story?
Basically, I started out in Canada as a Canadian real estate investor. I started when I was 22 years old, super young. My ambition started when I was around 18 years old. I didn't buy my first real estate property until I was 22. It was a fix and flip opportunity. The market was different back then, and the price point was a little bit lower, so the point of entry was a lot easier. So I started in my fix and flip career, but I kind of had a system going on, and the system was very simple. It was fix and flip property, take the proceeds from that fix and flip, and go buy rentals and keep rinsing, repeating this process until my cash flow got bigger, where I could do multiple flips at the same time, which allowed me to exit my profits and go buy multiple rentals. And I was on that trajectory for a really long time, just really doing real estate from simplicity, A, B, C, just very monotone. It was very traditional. At the time, there wasn't a lot of like online influence as there is today. It was very limited. The resources came from books or like watching cassette tapes. It was a while ago. So we definitely had less access to information. However, I will tell you, as I grew in the real estate investing industry and followed every guru that came out and tried to follow all these new and different techniques, wholesaling, land flipping, buying non-performing notes, multifamily was like a dream, very far reach to hit that target. So it wasn't even in my purview at the time. My idea of multifamily was like a 3 or 4-plex, maybe 6, not even looking at 100-unit buildings. It just wasn't in my purview. And as time evolved, I tried different techniques to advance myself, to build enough capital to do more. Because I thought, I was under this notion that it was a pre-notion that I had to have more money to do more real estate. It was just a very
Yeah,
old school mentality. And I'll be honest with you, it was the wrong mentality. Not that I did things wrong, I did things slowly. So my goals and achievements were very advantageous. And I know that I set the bar really, really high, as you should. And I felt that it was just taking forever to get there because in my mind and what was being produced to me from online, so what's been put in front of me was that you could do this really, really quickly. And the reality is that you can't just do it really quickly, meaning you can't wake up one day to the next and instantly be a millionaire unless you're
yeah,
getting a lottery ticket. And also in this game of real estate, it is a slow played game, but it's a well played game because the longer you stay in it, the more you will gain from it. Now, can you get in and out super quickly? Can you make 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 in a single day transaction? Yes, but the time leading up to that transaction doesn't happen in one day. And I know that you being in the finance sector, you can contest to that because the minute you get submitted a deal, by the time you've funded, even as a transactional lender, it's probably a week to 2 weeks away from that point in time. So from the procurement of a deal to the actual closing, there's always a time frame in between. So anybody that's going to tell you that this is a get rich quick business, they're lying to you. There's aspects and avenues to it where you can make a chunk of money quickly, but it's not getting rich quick. And along with those chunks of money, you're still going to have a ton of expenses. So going back a little bit to my history, in 2018, I actually went financially broke. I got involved in some transactions that were way over my head. The style of business that I was conducting was very advantageous with lack of experience and lack of guidance. And it wasn't so much the lack of knowledge because I thought I knew what I was doing based on what I was learning and I was self teaching. And that's not always the best way to go about this. And so I always advocate to people just find a mentor that you can latch onto, whether it's if it's a one-on-one situation, a group situation, a community situation where you can at least have that North Star giving you guidance from path of experience, not just path of knowledge. And I like to often use the terminology law school. A lot of people spend 4 to 8 years or 10 years in law school, but if they don't ever get to practice law, and that's what the terminology is when you start working as a lawyer or attorney, is you're practicing law. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're practicing the theory that you learned in school. So this business is very similar. You can be a theoretical real estate investor, consuming a bunch of knowledge and learning a bunch of stuff, but until you practice it, that's where you get that experience from. So sometimes when you practice from an inexperienced position without having a proper team or guidance, these were the costly mistakes happen. That happened to me in 2018. I cycled into this downward spiral of losses because my first loss was 1.1 million. Then I chased that loss into a bad deal, and that was another half a million. So now I'm at like 1.6. Then there was another $500,000 loss from there. And then it was just these small trickle events of bringing in legal teams to try to suppress the losses because there was some bad business that was done from some people who created some fraudulent activity. So not pushing the blame on anybody else. Ultimately, I have to accept the blame for the decisions I made. But this was the path that it led me down. So, rough calculation, just summarizing the number, it was about a $2.2 million cash loss. Now, as much as that hurts, in another way, once you heal from that, meaning understanding what happened and where you went wrong, and come to peace with what happened, it was that moment in my life that was the TSN turning point because it's what humbled me and allowed me to recalibrate myself. And really, that's what restored my relationship with Christ. Learning in that very moment that I'm not in control of the situation. I can try to steer the ship as best as I can, but ultimately, it's God that's going to put the opportunities in front of you. And it's the right opportunities that you are prepared for to take advantage of. So spend a little bit more time in preparation with what the right opportunity is rather than trying to just potentialize these opportunities. In that moment right there, it was October 17th, 2018. That's the day that I decided to surrender to the process and start putting God first in my life and seeking those answers right from the ancient scripture, which is the book that was written over 2,000 years ago. Accumulation of books, right there is all the knowledge that we really need. So before we get
Yeah.
to a certain sector of lending or real estate investing or wholesaling or flipping or multifamily land contracts or anything else that's fun and exciting that you can bring as a topic or method of real estate investing, prior to that, we need to look at the principles, dial it back, go to the basics. And that's really what I did in order to rebuild my foundation. I went down to the principles and basics and I brought the kingdom mentality into my business. And once I did that, I started applying those principles that are embedded in that scripture. And my business in 2019, it was a fresh restart with a new mindset, new team, and I went forward. And I can't tell you how blessed I am to tell you that in 2019, I made majority of that loss back just in that 12-month cycle. But it wasn't just a matter of having unwavering faith in God and in the process, but it was the relentless efforts that I put forward. I didn't give up. I wasn't shy to taking advice from other people. And I made sure that the messages that I was receiving, that I was able to quiet the noise around me, to listen to what was coming at me. And at this point, I can kind of rationalize, is this coming from a place of peace or chaos? And yeah, when things are under pressure and hurry up and do this and it has to happen this way and quickly, and it kind of negates like the your radar, and you're just like, oh, okay, well, it sounds good, I'm gonna just jump into it. Well, that's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you to actually just like sit and process the information, to engage in the process. So, and a lot of times, and this is a message that a good friend of mine has conveyed to us as well. A lot of times, as we are creations, as humans, we are creations and we have a creator. But like any creation or any product, sometimes they have to go back to the manufacturer for a little bit of a warranty check. And in my case, that's what happened. I had to be put in check because I was off of alignment. You know, it's just like buying a brand new car. You could buy a brand new car, you can drive this thing from Florida all the way up to Michigan. And along the way, there's going to be different roads. And on those different roads, you're going to experience smooth, rough, potholes, bumps, maybe something on the road has some debris. And my point is that brand new car, as well as it's dialed in along that path, your car is going to become uncalibrated. That
Yeah.
means you have to go back in for an alignment. So just because your car might be brand new and perfect and you're, driving safely, the road that you're taking, although it could be a great path, there are going to be, and I can guarantee you, there's going to be inconsistencies, there's going to be flaws, there's going to be potholes on that path. And when that happens, guess what? Naturally, even that brand new car will come out of alignment. So you have
Yeah.
to get in for that realignment every once in a while. And if that realignment in this metaphor is getting a mentor, somebody who's been down that road and can tell you, hey, listen, when you get to mile marker 17, there's a big pothole, divert it. It's almost like using Waze. If you guys ever use Waze instead of Google Maps, it'll tell you accident ahead, police reported ahead. Getting a good mentor or working with somebody, a partner, or anybody that's experienced in this business, they can almost act like your Waze,
That's
telling
a
you
great analogy.
ahead of you, right? So warning you what's to come. So you can make the conscious decision to slow down, you can reroute, you can avoid potential disaster and also potential infractions because who wants to get a speeding ticket also, right? And that's the thing. It's fun to go fast. And I'm not saying you got to go at a turtle's pace. You can go fast, but like Waze, if it notifies you that, hey, slow down, police ahead, you want to listen to that warning sign.
Yeah.
And through this process is very similar when you're doing it with somebody and not alone. So what I had to do for myself when I recalibrated and rebuilt my foundation, the first thing I did was I seeked a mentor for help, somebody who's already done it, because they are going to give you techniques and tricks and tips that are going to be very different from what you may perceive as something that you read or watched. Because until you're actually embedded in it, the information and advice you get online may be skewered or it may be macro and you need the micros. So I highly, highly advise just shoulder up with somebody who's already doing this. And it doesn't cost you money. I can tell you my mentorship started from books. And I took those books and those authors who wrote those books as guidance, as advice. But then what I did was I paired that up with a arm locking situation with an experienced investor. So this process didn't cost me a lot of money. My first initial investment was like $15 into a book. That time that I spent reading that book then led me to the relationships that I was able to make because the information in the book was guiding me on how to make that first relationship. So that next handshake that I did, that didn't make me $1 million. It unlocked the door to make me millions of dollars because I was able to now show that person what my purpose was and what my talents were. So by bringing forward my talents and putting their purpose first allowed me to have purpose in their process. So this is something that I've been meditating on, and God spoke to me on this as well in the word purpose. This business, the whole thing is predicated on purpose. Savon and I had an interaction where I needed a transaction funded for a double closing, and he was able to provide that money. So his purpose of funding transactions aligned with my purpose of acquiring that transaction. So that intersection of purpose right there was the profit. Now, intersection forms an X, which I like. And this purpose X framework is basically predicated on when two purposes will intersect with each other. But in addition to that, that X is also a symbol for multiplier because it doesn't just
Mhm.
stop there. We can go ahead and multiply these transactions several times forward. And then when Savan has a question or he needs help about closing a transaction or maybe analyzing a deal or guidance onto, hey, do you think this is the right purchase or purchase price or the right way to attack this certain deal and take it down, now my purpose can shine. So he could rely on me for my talents. And I can explain to him if I've been down that road before, or if I haven't been down that road before, I will point him in the best direction possible. Because my purpose is not only just to buy property and build an empire, my purpose is to leave a legacy by making impact with other people. So I'm super grateful that I was even brought on this call today because I want to be able to impact as many people as I can using these forms of outreach to the public because I think it's super important. And there's a truth behind real estate investing. The truth is very simple. It's not all glitz and glamour. It's not always going to be a win. There are going to be some losses. There's going to be a lot of risk involved. It's just how you're going to handle the losses, the risks, and also your tolerance in this business. If you think it's just going to be an invitation to getting rich tomorrow, you're wrong. And if you think that watching a few videos or taking a guru course online, watching an 8-segment video, it's going to put you in the position of being a powerful person, newsflash, man, that's not how this works. You need to actually get in the trenches. You need to take action. You need to experience what this is like. If you think you're going to watch a video on YouTube on how to ride a bicycle and then take that into the streets, I promise you're going to fall the first time. You may get up and figure it out the second, third, or fourth try. So that's great. But what's the difference? Watching something and actually doing it. So that first time you may fall. But I promise you, if I watched how to ride a bicycle on YouTube and then I shouldered up with someone who has experience riding bicycles and I say, hey, man, I'm going to attempt what I just learned, but I want you to guide me. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to hold the back of that seat post and they're going to ensure that you are taking
Going
flight on
straight.
the bicycle. And if you're going to be off balance, they're going to be there to guide you. They're going to be there to protect you and then also whisper in your ear, you're doing this incorrectly or you're doing a great job, keep going. And that's what builds that momentum. And in order to keep that bicycle from falling, you just got to keep that momentum. And if I don't hear while I'm riding this bike, because I'm not watching me from the outside, that, hey, man, Rob, you're doing a great job. Keep pedaling. Because that's what most people tell you. You got kids. You probably told your kids the same thing. Keep pedaling, keep pedaling, keep pedaling. Because that's that momentum. So the same thing goes for this business and any business. If you don't have proper mentorship, that proper accountability, that team behind you that's going to support you, you can't do this on your own. I promise you. I've tried it and I failed at it. So this is coming from the horse's mouth. I've tried to climb alone. I've failed several times. One thing that I can tell you that really changed the dynamics of my business is once I figured out these 3 principles: money, people, and deals. Putting those 3 ingredients into the equation and making sure I have all 3 is the alignment to any successful transaction. This triangular equation, money, people, deals, the best part about it that, in the past, I thought I had to get all 3 by myself until I
Yeah,
quickly learned that you don't. All you need to do is have 2 in the equation. The third one comes by itself. So I've already solved 66% of the equation I've solved 100% of the equation by bringing 66% of the ingredients, which is crazy, right? So if I told you to bake a cake, you need eggs, flour, and milk. Those are 3 ingredients that you need to bake the cake. But what I'm telling you is I can come with eggs and flour and the milk will automatically come to the table. Probably not the
for
best analogy
sure.
in this case, but you get my drift when I'm talking about ingredients to have a product. Now, the beautiful thing is this is a simplified process. It's not easy, it's simple. Okay, so that sounds confusing or contradicting, right? Well, the simplicity is all you need to do is bring those items to the table, those ingredients, but it doesn't have to be you searching for them. So
Yeah,
the simplicity is the equation. Where I say it's not easy, it's not going to be on your first ring of the phone, you're going to find a deal. It's not your first ring of the phone, you're going to find the money. Or your first ring of the phone, you're not going to find the people. I promise you, if it worked that way, there'd be a lot more successful people. And that, my friend, is called luck. I don't base my principles of life on luck. I
yeah,
base them on probability. And probability comes from the potential that you exercise. So when I put all that together and I dial it back and I dissect it, I just look at the purpose of other people. So if you are a deal provider, if that's one of your talents, I'm going to leverage that purpose that you have and I'm going to put that into my equation. If you are a money person and you have the ability and the talent to raise capital or you have capital, I'm going to seek that opposed to the actual capital itself. And then the last thing is the people who are going to manage or execute the operation, whether it's a fix and flip, whether it's an Airbnb rental, whether it's a long term rental, it doesn't matter. You could be selling shoes and you just need somebody to set up the stand and be at the marketplace. That's the people in the equation, in addition to the other people who are important to the equation. Having your legal team in place, having your title company, your escrow, your appraisers, your inspectors, your mortgage brokers, those people are important and essential to your team. So if I got to reverse engineer, watch how simple this is. People advertise what they do. If they're an attorney, an accountant, a title company, an escrow agent, an appraiser, they advertise. This is what they do. There's a big difference. Money, when you go to people like investors, they don't often advertise. This is a skill set you develop on how to find this money. It's very simple to find it, but it's not easy because you got to pick through people who claim they have money or people that claim that they have access to money when they really don't. And it's misleading. So that in itself is difficult. But the simplicity of it is once you attach yourself to an investor or somebody with the money, the other parts of the equation become a lot easier. Now, in my opinion, I think the most important part of this equation here would be the deal. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. As long as there is meat on the bone, as we said, everything else definitely falls in place. You can feed all the people that are involved. And that is absolutely crucial. As you said, people make the 66% of the ingredients. You only need to bring one. So that's a part that makes the process simple. And there's one more thing that you started with, which is you started with thinking it's a great get rich quick scheme, and that's how all of us start, because we see now, at least especially, we see all these influencers and there's only the positive sides highlighted on the Instagram and YouTube reels. And hey, you can do this in this minute. I'll teach you to close a deal in a week. This is all you need to do. And overall, the process is actually simple. Find a deal, find a buyer, close it. But finding the deal part, there is a lot of system that needs to fall in place. And whether it's a wholesaling business or that it's a lending business, or even acquisition of multifamily or anything at all. Deal is the main ingredient that's going to hold everything together, because if the deal is not right, you cannot bring any other people in. And if you cannot bring the people in, there's no way you can basically succeed alone. Real estate is a relationship business, and that's absolutely the key. Yes.
That you said it perfectly. Real estate is a relationship business. Yes, there's assets tied to it, but it's a relationship business because real estate, you can do real estate investing, a form of it, without even owning the real estate. You actually have to own the relationships. So if you were arbitraging real estate, which means you don't own the actual property, you rent it and then perform a different activity with it predicated on the rent that you have. So lease an apartment and then I sublet it on Airbnb and I just monetize off the gap. That's arbitrage, which is a
Yeah.
great entry point for people that don't have any money and they want to make cash flow every month. So it's not a form of real estate investing, it's just real estate activity. And even with that method, you still need the relationships. That's the most
Yes.
important. And those relationships will eventually lead you to becoming an investor. Because if you were able to create a business off of arbitrage, great, that's your active business. Your active business could be rental arbitrage on Airbnb or any sort of platform, fantastic. But let's just say you're a dentist and you're not doing Airbnb arbitrage. Both people have an aspiration to get into real estate investing, but they're not. They're actually doing an active business. One's completely out of the realm, but they're a dentist, and the other one is doing arbitrage, which is in the field of real estate, but it's not actually real estate investing. Now, this is why I don't ask people to change what they're doing from an active perspective if they're passionate about it, because when you're passionate about something, you will naturally find your purpose. Because the way to
For
determine
sure.
if your purpose, what your purpose is when you don't have to think about it, when you don't want to stop doing it, and when it comes
Mm.
natural to you. So for myself, sometimes I get caught talking for hours on calls like this, but then I realized because it's my passion. So my passion developed into my purpose. My purpose is to help inform you the best way possible to make the transformation, not flood you with information, because it's like flight school. All right. If you ever want to get your pilot license, do you think they spend the entire time teaching you how to successfully take off and land the plane? No, that's what the gurus do with the real estate investing. They teach you to take off, land the plane. Like you said, it's very simple to conclude a transaction. Oh, you have a deal? Follow these 3 steps. Okay, follow this 10 list, this 10 the 10 item checkpoint list. Okay, once you do this, now here's the next. That's great. I can give you the step by step process how to start your engine on an airplane, take off, and then land on the ground. But what they don't teach you is the hazard risks in between. So when you go to flight school, they prepare you for scenarios that may come up, may arise, and what to avoid, what hazards to avoid. So they make you fly on days that are raining, they make you fly on days that are foggy, they make you do barrel rolls, they make you simulate a crash scenario so you know how to handle it. And that's the real estate investing. I don't know if you agree with that statement, but it's often very much like macro level flight school. It's like, here's a step by step process on how to fly a plane. And it's like, okay, great. But what happens if turbulence kicks in? What happens if a bird flies through your engine? What happens if you are heading as a nosedive and your engine stopped working? What do you do? And there's all these checkpoints that are put in place during that process, during that real estate school, that is being given to you not by information, but transformation. You're actually in the sky when your instructor's next to you saying to you, all right, kill the right engine. Why are we doing that? Well, because I'm going to teach you how to do a safe landing if your engine were to die. And it's like, oh man, I didn't know I had to do that. And these are the things that people don't think about.
Thing, there are also the things that are bound to happen in real life, and it's same with real estate as well. It's theoretical knowledge, declarative knowledge, as Alex Hermosi puts it. It's always going to tell you the steps, but only when you start taking action, you start seeing what else can come up. So yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
Another analogy that I use with people, and it's probably not the most politically correct one, is you're only going to smell the shit once you step in it. And it's like you can walk in this path and follow the map, but you don't realize that you stepped in shit until you smell it. And this is what
Right.
happens in real estate. People can tell you what's going to come ahead of you, right? To try to guide you in a book. But actually, until you step in it, that's really when you're going to experience it. And to avoid these pitfalls or to watch them from a glance, this is why you need to take action, number one. And number two, it's called guided action. And this is not, there's tons of people in this industry. I'm not trying to tell you that I know everything because I don't. And if I don't know something about a subject previous to my pre existing methods, I just don't take action on it by myself. I will enter those circumstances, but with somebody. And that leads me to answer your question about my experience on double closings. I never knew what a double closing was until 5 years ago. I came from a different real estate market. Double closings is a transactional event where you can close between the seller and a buyer and then resell the transaction. Some people, it's almost like called legal wholesaling because people take the contract, they mark it up and they sell it. In today's environment, sorry, let me back up. In the previous environments, wholesaling was an entry point of getting knowledge on the price information and making a spread. So arbitraging that deal. I'll give you an example. If I know that seller A is going to take $150,000 for their property, but it's really worth 200 on the market, that's a gap of information that I can profit from. So you profit off that gap of information. The market doesn't know that the seller's willing to take 150,000. I know that because I have that direct contact, or my contact or referral partner knows that information. So we make money off that gap of information because the market is going to pay 200,000. So if I take it to market and I advertise this property that wasn't previously advertised or was poorly advertised, and I said, "Hey, look, I can get you this deal for 190,000," the market's going to respond to that and pay me that 190. So now I've got a gap of information that's worth $40,000. So in previous years, people were learning this skill, which is a great skill. But again, it's not real estate investing. It's just real estate activity because I'm profiting active business from real estate transactions. It's not real estate investing because real estate investing would require that I invest time or talent into the actual operation of the asset and then either sell it as inventory or keep it. Sorry, you could sell it as a product or keep it as inventory and rent it. So when doing the wholesaling, it was giving people the opportunity to just flip paper. It's almost like trading stocks. That's all you're doing. You're trading real estate like a stock. So it's not investing. It's real estate. Big difference. However, now as of recent, the real estate boards that protect the realtors in certain states, we're getting tons of complaints saying that why do I got to go through schooling, certifications, be licensed, and be governed by a code of ethics in order to sell real estate or represent people to sell real estate? Meanwhile, we're getting people that are being educated off of YouTube and are actually performing the same sort of activity of representing a client by selling their real estate to somebody else. So brokering a transaction with no certification, no legal form of paperwork, and they're able to do this and make more than my commission. It's not fair. So my point is they went to the real estate boards that protect them and govern them, and they said, hey, we can't let this happen. So in certain states, they passed legislations that they're no longer going to allow wholesaling to protect the realtors and to protect them from exactly what their complaints are. And not that I disagree with this, it just all they did was they added an extra step. What that extra step is now the wholesaler or the person in control of that gap of information has to actually take ownership of that contract. So by doing so, it puts a sense of responsibility on that person. And also it forces them to conclude on the transaction, which this is where we get a double closing. So the first closing is between the seller and let's call it the wholesaler for now, the wholesaler. Then from that point, the wholesaler owns the actual property, LLC or name is on title. Now they can have the ability to sell the property, not just the contract. So by doing so, they close the first transaction, seller to wholesaler. Then they have to close the second transaction, wholesaler to buyer. So this event is called a double closing because you're doing two closings on the same property in a short period of time. Now, let's not get this confused with flipping real estate. If you're going to buy an asset, close on it, improve it through ways of rehab or renovation, then sell it, that is considered flipping real estate because you're actually improving the asset. But if you're doing a double close, that terminology is just because it's in a shrunken time period. Typically, same day up to a week, 2 weeks max. If you're double closing anything more than that, you're in the transaction, and it probably means it wasn't a good deal and you're having trouble selling it. So the most effective way to double close is to line up your buyer simultaneously when you have that seller in place. And the reason why you want to do that is for speed and efficiency. Now, if you don't have the money to double close, because this does require that you bring the cash to the table, this is where the industry of transactional lenders has become popular. And these guys come into effect. So you got guys like Savan who have the capital and access to additional capital to close these transactions in that interim process. I want to clarify, just let me reiterate this process again. In the olden days, wholesalers were able to take a contract, get a property, put it under contract, and assign the contract. So they're just moving a piece of paper. It doesn't require any of their own capital to be exhausted to close the transaction. There's really no, outside of your marketing, there's no cost to do this if you did it entirely by yourself. You drum up a contract with the seller, and then you advertise the property, market it, and then you have a buyer who's interested, gives you a deposit, you have a contract with them, and really it's legwork at this point. What they've done is made it a little bit more challenging where you actually have to now purchase that property with that first contract you have, and you need to have actual money to do this. You cannot do this by way of assignment anymore. You need to bring cash to the table. You could do this through ways of transactional lending. You can go straight to an investor, or sometimes complicated events, if the seller doesn't really need the money and is willing to do what's called a seller finance, you can do what's called a wrap on the seller finance. Or you could take that property, purchase it with seller finance terms attached to it, and then sell that property with the same terms.
Yeah.
So there's multiple ways to address these types of scenarios. The most common, easiest, and path of least resistance and less confusion, you just get yourself a transactional lender, bring them, invite them to the table, and like Savan mentioned, if there's enough meat on the bone, you're able to perform this with simplicity. If you're struggling to put together a transactional deal, it's probably because it's not a good deal. And unless you have a firm and final contract with proof of funds ready to close that deal, this is why a lot of these lenders won't give you the money to do it. And that is a clear indicator right there. You don't need a book. You don't need a mentor. You don't need a guide to tell you that that's a bad deal. The lender itself will speak to the language of this not being a good deal if they're reluctant to lend on it because the risk is too high. So that should be a clear indicator and a key indicator that, wait a second, this is a bad deal. So some of the practices that we put into place in our business, if I get a deal sent to me and maybe, I look at it, my team will analyze it first. We have like a filtration process in our business where my team will look at it, they'll analyze it, and only if it meets certain checkpoints, then they'll bring it to me for final approval. And when I look at this deal, even if it passes those checkpoints and it comes to me for final approval, if I don't feel at peace with it, if I'm like, something just doesn't seem right, guess what I do?
Get another piece, set of item.
But right, most people would think get an appraisal, right? And I'm talking pre-appraisal. Like this is just like preliminary when I get deals sent to me. So before I spend $1, I'll tell you how to do this completely for free. You want to make sure your deal is a good deal, and I'll tell you this. It's a free method on how to do it. And this is why people overcomplicate the process. You don't got to go take a course on how to analyze or appraise property. You don't have to read or watch a YouTube video on how to do a comparative. You could eliminate all that. Relationship. Have a relationship with an appraiser or a lender. Send it to them.
Right.
And if you don't have a relationship with an appraiser yet, or they feel like, hey, man, I'll look at it, but you got to pay me because you don't have that relationship yet, that's cool. Guess what? You want the free way to analyze a property? Send it to a lender. They will give you their lending parameters based on the value of that property. They will do the legwork of doing their own desktop appraisal in-house or look at the market and say to you, hey, I agree with the value. I will lend you 90%. Now, if you're getting somebody to lend you 100%, introduce them to me because I would love to work with them. But this industry has their own set of parameters and their risk tolerances. So the more leverage the lender's willing to offer you on that deal, the better that deal is. So right there, if I get a deal that I feel confident about, but there's something that's really not settling, I just send it to a lender. And I'm like, hey,
That
Savan,
makes sense.
deal. What would you give me? I don't ask them, what do you think of the value? No, it's the way you posture yourself. I'm confident I got a good deal. Hey, I got this deal. I'm looking for the best terms. What are you going to give me? You come back to me with a 70 LTV, I know that's a bad deal. You come back to me with a 90 LTV, that's because you're salivating that there's so much equity or there's so much spread here from what I'm purchasing for what it's really worth that your money is so secure, you're willing to actually lend me more. Does that make sense?
That does. Yep,
And
for sure.
this is completely entirely free. So people get all hot and bothered when they hear like, oh man, I don't got money to invest in real estate, or I don't have money to learn how to do this business, or I don't have money to hire a mentor or to work with a mentor or a coach. Well, dude, this is the money that you need to invest in yourself. Don't invest it into these, video programs and courses up front. Those may very well be helpful to learn a different skill, but before you
Mhm.
can learn a skill, you got to learn the process. And that process is something that gets instilled with you. Something I just shared with you right now is a process that I now use because I have a different lens. It's a process that I do with every part of the business. So I'm going to give you another one because this is another free tip on how to evaluate the value of a property without having to spend $1. Send to a potential buyer. If you are wholesaling properties or you are new to the game and you're just flipping some contracts, doing some double closes just to get some capital in the bank account, you have a buyer's list. You must be selling these properties to somebody. So if you have an active buyer in the market, send it to them. Put a price tag that you think they will pay for it. Their response will dictate more or less what that property is worth. It'll reassure you if the property is way too high or if you're getting a good deal, depending on the speed of their response and what they counter. Now, I will warn you, sometimes these people will try to get a
Lower.
deal out of you, but that's why I said you got to look at those two things: speed of response. If you send me a deal that I think is profitable at 200 grand, I'm still going to make the attempt to try to buy it for 190, but I'm going to respond quickly. Psychologically, in the process, product, look at the process. I go based on my indicators of speed and my feedback. If you come back to me and you give me a low counter, like, dude, this thing's not worth 150, I could compare those to how fast did Rob respond to me and what was the difference in price. So even if I respond quickly, that's not the end all be all. It's just an indicator of level of excitement to that deal. And then you have to pair that up with what their counteroffer is. Like I mentioned, if you've got speed to your response with a tight, close to your asking price counteroffer, that means you've got a good deal in your hands. That means that they're willing to pay that number. But if just they might be a person who responds quickly because that's the way they operate, and I love that. But if they respond quickly with a super low counteroffer, it means your deal is not worth that kind of money. And to get them
Yeah,
from the 150 to 200, it's going to be a tough road to get there. So right there for me is an indicator. It's not a bad deal. It's a bad price. I got to renegotiate with my seller and bring that price down, or I got to be
mhm,
willing to take less of a profit because I'm being too greedy on this transaction. Does that make sense?
that does. Uh, there are some really good tips on this. Basically, that again ties back to relationships part where it's a relationship business. If you have contacts, if you have people that are willing to work with you because you have good ethics, you have good communication, you present yourself correctly, you will find a way to make things work for you. And there's one more thing I want to touch on the double closing side specifically. You mentioned the timeline of it. Uh, this is also about having a good deal. When I, as a lender, look at a deal, and we only fund that once they have the end buyer in place and then their funds are in escrow. So the deals that we do, they are 24 hours max. So having an end buyer in place, that also speaks to the same thing as you mentioned. It is a good deal, and it also protects everyone involved because if the funds are not in place, you don't close on a property that you didn't want to own originally. So that is a very valuable as well,
Yep.
for sure.
I agree with that completely. And look, sometimes things don't go 100% according to plan. We get that. And there's times where maybe the buyer falls off. Something can occur as a hiccup. We completely understand how that works. That's why we don't limit our options just to one prospective buyer. And like
Yeah,
anything else, if you're on the MLS or you're marketing the property publicly, if it's a good deal, you're going to have multiple offers. Yes, we're going to take the highest and best, but it doesn't mean I cut off my option number two, because if it does fall apart, be prepared to potentially quickly sell it for a discount. And again, these are things that, yes, you can read them in a book. I'm not saying that I'm the only fountain of knowledge in this industry. What I'm saying is, if you're not with somebody who can give you that quick advice or give you the accountability, whether you're going to go, to avoid these disasters quickly, you could be stuck holding that property. That could be a disaster situation, which eventually you may figure out. But think about it like this: if I were to buy a book on how to do transactional lending or how to double close, I can read that book, digest it, understand that knowledge, and just really, really absorb it as if I was the expert in doing it. But when I run into a situation that requires me now to resolve or get out of that position, look at the time frame it takes for me to go back to that information source, which is could be the book or could be a video, track down exactly in that piece of material where that information is, rather pick up the phone, reach out to somebody on my team, somebody who is a mentor, somebody who is a partner, or somebody who's just been through that process before. And it doesn't even have to be somebody that you've paid. Get that pre-notion out of your head. This is not a sales
right.
to go hire a mentor. Go to somebody who's willing to give you this information. And it doesn't even have to be exchange for money. It could be exchange for you working with them, for you doing something purposeful. And this is that intersection of purpose I talked about before, where they're going to give you that information gracefully because they want to see you succeed. This is something you can even just turn to an attorney who's already working with you and say, hey, I got a question. Why? Because attorneys, here's another free tip. Attorneys have seen, if they've been in the business for a while, thousands of transactions and have probably run into this scenario before. So if you
Right.
don't have the answer, guess what? I'm calling somebody with experience. Doesn't have to be Mr. Grant Cardone, doesn't have to be Cody Sperber, it doesn't have to be Alex Hermosi or anybody that has done this probably 1,000 times if I don't have direct access to them because I didn't want to pay for their services. So I could just go call somebody on my immediate team because part of your foundation building is those relationships, building that team. So in your business, even though you're not even purchasing real estate, you deal with a ton of lawyers or attorneys, title companies, being a transactional lender, where if you did get yourself into a sticky situation on a real estate transaction, Savan, you could go ahead and just call somebody you did a transaction with because you have a relationship and then ask them for the advice. And I promise you, they will be inclined to give it to you based on that relationship. That is zero exchange of money. You don't got to pay for advice unless it's something that's brand new. So I suggest if you don't have any money, go rub shoulders with people who are already doing this and see how you can fit in. I could tell you just within our community alone that I offer this every single Saturday for free. You'll get me on an hour, sometimes more every Saturday. And I try to give you as much information as possible. And I encourage people to rub those shoulders because during that time, I will answer these questions because it's time that I've dedicated purposefully to help people. It doesn't take away time from my business. It doesn't take away time from my family. It doesn't take away time from my life because I've scheduled it in intentionally to help you. So it blows my mind when people don't take advantage of opportunities like that, where you can just rub shoulders with somebody who's experienced it or that can guide you in the right path. And I commend the people that have relentlessly been taking action, coming into the group, whether they don't have money, time, or talents yet, and they're developing that. Because I'll tell you, by accident, call it, just gracefully, they're getting the information they need. And when they reach to me, guess what? I see the support that they're putting in and the efforts that they put forward. I'm not going to deny them of that help. I might not show up on time for a meeting because if it's caught during my week times, but that's why I got to be super intentional and purposeful. And then my point is, if you're not surrounding yourself right now with people who are successful and who have done this and who have experience with it, that should be your first step. Forget everything
Mm-hmm.
else, quiet the noise around you because the market, the ads on Facebook, the Instagram ads, all that stuff is just going to cloud your judgment. It's going to lead you in just different directions because those people are professional online marketers who have the ability to target your emotions. And what happens when we're emotional? We buy on emotion. Okay. I just
Yeah.
a friend yesterday. Sometimes we do these like power huddles with guys in different industries, and they're all successful individuals making seven figures plus. And we get together and we actually just do like a power work session. Everybody's working individually on their own stuff, but we're also exchanging notes in our
Mm-hmm.
industries. So yesterday I was at a round table. One of the guys is in e-commerce and he shared something very interesting. He said 83% of online transactions happen from women because they are the most emotional buyers. So a lot of the e-commerce stuff that happens online is directed and targeted to women because women will emotionally buy. And I'm not trying to be sexist or feminine, masculine and saying that they're making bad decisions. I'm just telling you what the stats are. The stats are that those purchases are 83%, which is well over the majority is women, but they're triggered by an emotional purchase, not just because
Right.
they're women and they're buying feminine things. It's just that's how the marketers target it. So when you have strong data like that, what do you think other people in the market are going to do? They're going to trigger that emotion and target that 83%. Same thing happens in real estate. If you're constantly online searching how to do real estate with no money down or how to get
Yeah.
started in real estate or getting into apartment complexes, guess what happens? There's this thing called an algorithm. It's going to pick up what you're searching. It's going to target you with ads. How do I know this? Because just not too long ago, myself, okay, started running ads the same, but my ads are a little bit different. I'm not targeting people to prey on their emotion. I'm trying to target the people who actually want to get the right help so I can help. And you know what the crazy part is? One of those ads probably hit you, Savan. And guess what that led you to? A free Facebook group. Zero monetization. It's not even about that. It's about making as much impact in the world as possible. And if I can do that, I'm blessed from the proceeds and profits that come from my business that I can run ads with no expectation. But the ads that I'm running is not to try to evoke that emotion from you. Those ads are trying to get your attention so that this can possibly impact your life, which for me goes back to that X, which is that multiplier. If I can impact your life positively by something that I told you or shared with you, guess what happens to your friends, family, and relationships around you? They're positively impacted as well. That's called the
Makes sense.
multiplier effect. So that
Yeah.
X in that purpose X framework is not just the intersection of profit, but it's that multiplier that my purpose is going to evoke your purpose, which is going to multiply to benefit and impact others positive.
Yep, yep. Awesome. So there's one thing we skipped over when we got into technical closes, which is what your current business looks like. What is your vision and where are you headed? We talked about your story. What's the present and the future looking like?
All right, good question. So my business is very, very simple. It operates from a point of active income being the top bucket, if you will. And what I do is I've taken the strategy that billionaires use because I'm not here to try to invent things or reinvent the wheel. I just look at what's already been done, evidence. So I base everything really off of evidence, and I take strategies that have already been done and I try to replicate them and just recalibrate them to fit into my lifestyle and to achieve my goals. So one of the methods that is used, and this is performed and proven by billionaires around the world, doesn't matter what industry that they're in, is they will take the money that they earn and they'll split it into two types of risk investments. One could be on the lower end and one could be in the mid to high end. So essentially what I've done in my business today is I've taken my active business. So let's pretend I got a bucket here. I got my active business. Now I take 50% of the profits and I put it into low risk passive income business. And I take the other 50% and I put it into a mid risk compounding income business. So what that looks like for me is my active business. And again, it could be anything you want. You could be a hairdresser, a dentist. I love real estate. My bread and butter. I've been flipping real estate now for 15 plus years. So for me, because I don't have a long attention span, I like getting into the fix and flip profile of property because I used to build homes. I've done tract homes, I've done custom homes, luxury, high rise development. It just takes too much time for my tolerance level. So for me, I really, really like getting into properties. I've developed a proprietary system called the Flip system, which is really just getting in the property, doing four things. So flooring, lighting improvements, and paint. And that takes us usually 4 weeks. So that's my active income. With that active income, I take those flips, the profits, and I put 50% into passive income. So that passive income is typically in the form of a rental property or a long term mortgage. So I will lend that money to other investors on a long term mortgage, usually up to 2 years. That's going to generate some passive income, but it's super safe because I'm tied and securitized to an asset it's real estate and it's got tons of equity. Now, the other 50% of the profit, I will take that and I will put it into a compounding income business. What that can look like is short term lending. So, stuff that you get your money back within a short period of time. Typically, the longest length of short term lending that we'll do is up to 6 months. And what that allows me to do is reinvest that money twice in 1 year. So, that's where that compound effect takes place. Now, when you start compounding your income, it grows rapidly with the same amount of principal in a shorter period of time. You could use a compounding calculator to decipher that and just take a glance on how that looks. So if you look at like doubling a penny every single day, it's the number at the end of it is I think in the hundreds of thousands. So
Yeah.
it's about that compounding effect. So those are kind of my two buckets now, or sorry, three buckets: active business, passive business, compounding business. From there, I'm obviously making a lot more money than what I was making just in my one active business, which is what everybody today tries to generate advice on. Like, hey, just do this, or do wholesaling, or do fix and flipping, or do whatever it is. Cool. That's your active business. Be a dentist, hairdresser, barber, work at Chipotle. It doesn't make a difference. That's your active income. As long as you're taking that and now investing it. So this active part is like trading. You're just trading time for money, or you're trading. That's what that is, active trading, right? Could be stock, could be whatever. You're trading. I'm taking that money and I'm going to invest it into two vehicles. One of them may cruise at a slower pace, but it's less likely to get a flat tire. The other one's going to travel at a high speed pace, may run into a flat tire or a pothole quicker than the slower vehicle. But guess what? I'm going to make it to my destination faster, which is time freedom. Time freedom is generated from making money and wealth. So
Right,
I'm actually
right.
buying back my time by having the wealth. Now, in that triangular equation, I still have mega profits that are coming out of those two vehicles. So after the profits come from my active, they trickle down into my passive and compounding vehicles. From there, the profits that come out of those two vehicles go into what I call the tub of wealth. Now, this tub of wealth for me is long-term hold assets that I own entirely by myself. I got no partners in those. I got rarely any investors. And if they are investors, they're being recapitalized in the first 3 to 5 years. And the reason why I do this is because that tub of wealth for me is where I'm building my legacy. This is where my family and the generations to come could benefit from, because I own it 100% myself. Not saying that I own it in cash. I definitely have debt on it, which takes me to my next point of why I have this tub of wealth and why I'm usually the sole owner or controller of it, is because I get all of my taxable benefits from that tub of
Mhm.
wealth. So I've created an ecosystem that allows me to make a bunch of money, take that money, multiply it, take that money, put it into a stable asset that now makes me more money again, because I'm making cash flow from that business. What I'm doing with that is I've created a safe haven wealth vehicle that also provides me with tax credits. Now, let me break that down what it looks like. If I make $1 million in my active business, I take that $1 million, I split 500,000 in my passive, 500,000 in my compounding. Now, let's just say I take the money from those businesses, and from the passive, I make 100,000, and from the compounding, I make 500,000. Well, now I've got $1.6 million profit. Profit meaning these are gains. If I take that minus my expenses, let's just even say I got a couple hundred grand in expenses, now down to $1.4 million in profit. I take that and I go buy myself an asset. I put the whole $1.4 million in before my tax year is up into that asset. What
Mhm.
happens? Non-taxable event, because I'm going to depreciate that asset and use the paper loss to offset my taxes. Now, by doing this performance, I've now put my money into a secure asset. I've reduced my tax bill to virtually zero. I'm also building wealth through asset accumulation. And then guess what? I can go and put debt, which is 100% tax free because it's debt. You got to repay it at some point on that asset to extract a portion of that 1.4 million to put back into my business or to go do virtually whatever I want with it. Now, along the ways, there are other, amazing benefits from being in this business. If you don't know this already, there's a rule. If you spend more than 750 hours working as a real estate professional, you have other tax benefits as well. So I'm not a tax attorney, so I can't give advice on it. I can just tell you what we do in our business and the structure, advised from professionals. So don't take this as professional advice. This is just an experience I'm sharing with you. And I can tell you that in doing so, I've created this amazing ecosystem that allows me to live life on my terms because I'm building wealth in the background. We're making money. And at any point in time, if I want to shut off that active income vehicle, which I enjoy doing, it's part of my passion. If I want to shut that off, I have these other investment vehicles that have been invested, which means they're bringing me a return, that are pretty much paving the way for my life and future generations to come.
That's defined as wealth, basically, where you don't have to be actively involved in it. So That's amazing. How does the community redefine you that you are building up play into your vision? What's your goal with that? Share a little bit about that.
Awesome. So I created Redefine You basically as a hybrid of a transformational program, not just into the real estate market, but trying to transform people because it came from a point of experience. I was once where a lot of people are, not just saying financially broke or got hurt from real estate, but also in that state of like analysis paralysis. And I once was in a position where I had so much drive and desire to become a real estate investor and to live life on my own terms, but I just didn't know how to get there. And there was so much confusion in the marketplace. Now, I did do this game very successfully at a young age. Like I said, I started at 22 years old. When I was about 30, 31 is when catastrophe happened. So I had a good run. If you look at my history, you'd be like, dude, you had a good stretch. You just made a stupid mistake. But the reality was, it was the mistake stemmed from the internal. What I did past that was I rebuilt myself. This was evidence. Like I said to you before, I base everything I do on evidence. So now that I have this evidence, I said, well, hold on. If I can help other people from making those mistakes and also helping them achieve financial freedom, that will unlock their purpose or unlock time freedom for them to live out their purpose. So the first step really in Redefine You is helping people discover their purpose. That is the first intention of this.
Mhm.
Second to that, because a lot of people are fixated beyond their purpose and they just want to learn how to make money. It's like, okay, cool. I'll teach you how to make money if you want to learn how to make money. It's pretty simple. But bigger than making money is what are you going to do with that money? So a lot of people, yeah, I'm going to travel. And it's just like this common lingo. But until you peel some layers back on people and really figure out who they are, you can see deep down inside, they've got bigger aspirations. They want to do real things. I was just on a call the other day and, breaking through the layers, peeling back those layers like an onion, I got to the core of this individual's purpose. And although it was kind of like embedded with travel, their purpose was actually pretty deep. They want to take volunteer trips, which they do have to pay for, the actual excursion, which is going into the wildlife and helping these animals. So that they want to go and I think it was like freeing the turtles from the traps in Costa Rica, or that was one excursion. Another one was going to Africa and helping these elephants who are endangered, or there's scenarios where they have situations they're malnourished or whatever the case is. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful purpose that if I can just you by giving you the tool to unlocking the money that makes it possible to go do those trips on your own accord without having to stress and worry about anything else. Look at that multiplier effect. So that's really why Redefine You was started. The school community that I created was, and I drive that traffic to, which is completely free, by the way. The reason why I created that community was because I'm not the center of attention. I wanted to form a community of like-minded individuals who can also bring equal value to support one another. So you're a prime example of my vision coming to reality. So I started a community. I got your attention, brought you in, helping you and your living out your purpose. And now I've got your support, and your support is helping other people in the community. So you see how the multiplier effect really takes off. And this is kind of, in a nutshell, the first intention of why I did it. Second intention is to just build an awesome team with awesome relationships around me, because I know that with that, it's going to help
Mhm.
our business as a byproduct to get into more deals. It's going to help us in our other businesses passively, and in our compound business to help other people as well. So there's still a monetary aspect to it that benefits. But now look at this. If I shut off my active business, I told you I like doing fix and flipping. If I shut off my active business and I can just hang out in my passive income business and my compounding business all day, even if I shut up the compounding business, which there's no such thing as passive income, by the way, you still got to do something for it. But my rental portfolio that's in my passive business, that takes up the least amount of time in my day. If I can concentrate solely on that, by helping people build their business, it gives me that time freedom to make that impact. Make sense?
Definitely.
Fix and flip, which I've automated it, so it doesn't take a lot of time out of my day, but it does take up some time in my day. And unfortunately, you experience some of those setbacks from being able to attend a call on time, because sometimes it requires my attention. If I completely disconnected that, then it would bring me into another realm of solely working on those other two vehicles. Now, if I disconnected those two vehicles, it leaves me with my tub of wealth, which for me is the ultimate wealth, time freedom. Now, doing absolutely nothing for that tub of wealth. Why? Because it's set up properly where it's 100% self managed. There's checkpoints in place before they get to me, and I am only in case of emergency. So, in this particular case, I am like the fire truck. You only call me when the sprinklers can't put the fire out, if you can't put it out with an extinguisher, and you really need the backup. How often do you really seeing a fire truck going to the same place every single day? Not often, right? So that's kind of how I've built this business. And this now allows me to work with people, and it gives me the time freedom that I once lacked to spend with my friends and family. And this is the same ability that allowed me to move from a country where I was a workaholic, I was seasonally depressed with the snow in the winters, to now living out my dream. And I live in a beautiful place. So don't look at the sweater as this is a fake backdrop. There's air conditioning in here that's super cold. But my point is, all this would have not been possible if I didn't change who I was. So I just want to, I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here with the same point over and over, but it's super important to understand. Real estate didn't define me. I redefined who I was. And with recreation, that's what allowed me to unlock my potential. We all have the same hidden potential within us. You've got your own independent, unique skill set. I've got my own unique skill set. I'm not 6'4", you won't see me in the NBA. So I'm going to use my skill set based on my distinct design to what I'm really good at. Fortunately, I've been really good speaking with people and giving that charismatic advice. And I've been led with a great heart. So everything that I do is with my heart on my sleeve and with good intention. So it comes from a place of positivity. And that's kind of the principles of what we live on, right? God asked us, the most important commandment out of the commandments in the ancient scripture is just to love thy neighbor, right? If we all love each other and got along, the world would be a better place. And that's not something cliche to say. That's just a reality of it. So if I can instill those two principles into people in a community, and we could grow this thing into a community of like-minded people, people who are filled with positivity, with passion, with love, with talent, we're just going to positively influence everybody within that community, and that multiplier effect kicks in. So I'm doing this 1, 3, 5 people at a time. And those 5, if they're impacting 5, there's that compound. I got 25. Those people help another 5. Now there's 125 plus my 30. I got 155. You see how this just thing keeps building? And that's what I'm here to do. And I'm happy to do it every single weekend.
Amazing. From personal experience, being part of those calls, there is massive value being dropped on those, and yeah, it's great to be part of that.
Thank you.
We can kick this up a notch, and we can basically do a quick Q&A type of thing on the closing sides. And I wanted to draw on your experience and basically get those questions from the perspective of someone who is basically trying to do this for the first time, or have you even considered how to navigate the next challenging market, which, as you mentioned, NAR kicking in more regulations and basically wholesaling being assignment itself being challenging. So we can go from there. So we discussed why double close is important as a strategy. So what are the other benefits apart from the compliance to the new regulation that you have experienced? Basically, why would you choose to do a double close if the regulation were not in place, basically?
I would say the two most important and the greatest benefits of doing a double close is, one, you control that transaction. When you own it, you control it. So that's the first one. You're in full control. The seller can't back out on you. Maybe previous lien situation, nothing can kind of creep up. Once you close that transaction with clean title, you control it. So that's probably the first most important thing. The second, I would say, is that you now have control of the unrealized capital. So again, it goes back to that information of the gap of information is where your profit is. So by doing that double close, you can essentially capitalize on the unrealized equity in the property. So I'm going to give you an example. If you're buying a property for 150,000 and you are direct to a seller, you take that to a lender, even though that property may be worth 200,000, that $50,000 of equity, which is your discount from the market, that $50,000 will never get capitalized on or realized until you sell the property or wait to refinance it. So by double closing, you can actually capitalize on it upfront by performing a double close transaction.
And from the experience, what are typical challenges of a double close and things to keep in mind while going for it? So it's either underwriting, is the underwriting any different from a simple assignment?
Challenges
From the
both.
from the perspective of the wholesaler that's trying to do a double close. From an assignment, it's simple, get it under contract and then get a end buyer to perform on it.
Okay,
But double close, and
wholesaler, like I'm the middle guy.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
so the challenges that you should be aware of, or the risks you should be aware of when you're performing a double close as the individual, as the wholesaler, is one, clear marketable title. There's a lot of title fraud that can go on. You want to make sure that the person that you're buying the property from is actually the owner on record. You can do this by verifying it with county records yourself, and also your title company will run title. Another thing you want to be weary of is nothing creeps up on title, such as an unregistered promissory note. Now, oftentimes people they can make financial decisions in their life by borrowing money and pledging the deed to their home. So just because it's not recorded on title, sometimes there will be something called an unregistered promissory note. I'm going to give you an example. So I own a home and I need to borrow 20 grand from you.
Mhm.
It's got equity. I got a first mortgage. And I say to you, Savan, I got to borrow $20,000. It's a short period of time. I don't want to go to the bank, line of credit, all this fun stuff. I will give you a promissory note that I'm going to pay you, prompt
Mhm.
pay, and I'm going to give you the security of my home as the asset. Okay. So what you're going to get is a piece of paper that says, I owe Savan $20,000. If I don't pay him, he can go after my home.
So that is not it doesn't go through title company. It's not recorded on deed. Just on that promissory note, it says that I agreed to put my home as a security, put my asset as a security.
Now,
So that's never going to be.
that's right. So not everybody registers those notes. It's because of a lack of education, and some people are just lazy. They don't go and register the notes. So even though the intention is to register it, or you have the authority to register it, some people don't do that. But what will happen in this scenario? Now Savan catches wind that I'm selling my house. Okay, so two things can happen. I go and sell my house. Savan doesn't know about it. He lost his security, right? Or this is the event that can affect the wholesaler. Let's say I was selling my house to a wholesaler and I had a $150,000 first mortgage on this property and I sold it to the wholesaler for 200 grand. He's going to sell it for 250, whatever. Well, I have $50,000 that's going to come back to me after closing. And the title will reflect that there's a first mortgage of 150. But nobody knows that I owe Savan 20,000 in the background on a promissory note. But Savan catches wind that I'm selling my home and goes to the transaction, calls the title company and says, surprise, look what I have here. By notifying the title company that you have a promissory note that directs $20,000 from that property to me, they're going to pull it from closing. Now, in this particular case, it doesn't affect the wholesaler because of what I just told you, the 150 to 200. But if that property was worth 160 and I have a first mortgage for 150, that's only leaving me 10 grand. Guess what? Your promissory note is going to enforce the 10,000 because that's all that's coming back to me. But then the other 10,000, where is it going to come from? You're going to halt the transaction. The reason why you're going to halt the transaction is because you're not getting your full 20 grand back. Did I explain that? Does that make sense to you? How it could creep up on you down the line?
That does make sense, but what is the hedge against it? How do you make sure that that doesn't happen? If it's not recorded anywhere, there is no way. you can find it out in the title search. But is the seller the only source of clarity on that?
The seller would be the only sense of a source of clarity. Now, what you can do for a precautionary measure, again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you legal advice, but what you can do is have them sign an indemnity agreement. So this
Okay.
indemnifies the, that they're swearing that there's no other monies or encumbrances to the property, and this kind of indemnifies you of the responsibility as the buyer. And most times it can't hold up. If you It may hold up a transaction, but it won't hold up in court. You put that in front of a judge and you're like, look, we have an affidavit that there's no there's no other debt obligations to the property. They've indemnified us of this security, so the damages cannot be attached to this property. Now, by
Mhm.
doing that doesn't get them off the hook for paying their 20 grand. Unfortunately, the person who didn't securitize, it'll affect them. And again, I would double check this information with your attorney, but just quickly off the top of my head, that's probably the best way that I would make sure that that
Okay.
can't happen is you have an indemnity agreement and also an affidavit of acknowledgement that there's no other.
Hmm. Okay. Were you going to add on to that any other challenges on that?
So
If not, we can move on as well. I
another
was just asking.
challenge could be if you buy a property that has tax arrears or any liens on it.
Hmm. Yeah, that will obviously
Right.
show up in the title search.
That'll
Okay.
show up in title search, yes. Something that won't show up in title search that could creep up on you later could be sometimes people, and this is not common practice, but sometimes people will sell the property with the LLC. So you'll actually buy the shares of the LLC that it's owned in. Investors will do this often because it helps with the taxable event.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that, even though you're wholesaling or whatever the case may be, you carry the liability forward from that LLC. So if
Mm.
there was a fix and flip that you're buying and there was some bad work that was done, that LLC could be held liable. And this doesn't just work for double closings as well. Sometimes, and this is why it's important to have the correct entity structure. Let's just say you're fix and flipping homes yourself. I know it's off the topic of your question, but it triggered another question. I've seen in previous cases where you've got Savan Flipping LLC and you do multiple properties, and that's your entity that you flip out of, and you use the same one for every property. If you've done some faulty work in a property that you sold, even though the transaction's closed, they can come after you and sue your LLC. So,
Okay.
yeah, these are kind of like attachment effects from buying the LLC in that particular case.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, when you're doing this double closing, the other thing that I can foresee from experience happening is, and this is very rare, but it's possible, in the event that the contract has a condition in it. For example, the home comes with garage door openers, the motor in the garage. You close on the transaction and then you go to sell the transaction without even seeing the property because a lot of wholesalers like that. The new buyer shows up and sees that there's no garage door motors. What checkpoints do you have to prove that they were there? So these are like small things because these are things that may not show up on obviously on title, but then you're liable because your contract with the seller said includes all chattels, includes the fridge, stove, appliances. Now you flip the deal, double close, same day. You kind of did it with your eyes closed because you'd never been to the property, and then all of a sudden, the buyer who bought that deal from you takes possession of the home and says, "Dude, what the f? There's no stove, there's no fridge, no garage door opener. What's going on?" Now you're stuck going after the seller. So those are things that could happen in a double close scenario. It can happen in any scenario when you're flipping the real estate, but more so when you're doing exercising double closes and wholesaling because you're not actually being physically inspecting the property on most cases on closing.
Makes sense. So how does the conversation with the seller is different on a double close compared to an assignment? So typically you don't want, one of the reasons for a double close is that you don't want your either you don't want to disclose that you're assigning or selling to someone else, or that you want to hide your assignment fee itself. So how does that conversation look like to the seller? Because you still have to get the buyer into the property to see it and to have a walkthrough and get a boots in the ground person in there to take the pictures. And so what's the difference with the conversation with the seller?
Yeah, so that's another great benefit of doing double closings. You're able to protect your profits. You don't have to disclose your profit because they don't need to know, and especially if you do it in a short time frame, by the time it's recorded, they don't know. So great method of how to protect your profits as a wholesaler or not have to justify them. And in order to get the buyer in the property while you are under contract, you just bring them in through your inspection period. Now, if you are set up properly in that market, you typically will have boots on the ground that will be there as your representation. This will
Mhm.
alleviate any questions direct to the seller. This person will act as your intermediary so that the buyer can't go and ask the seller questions. Also, when you do this, you don't want to propose it as if you're auctioning the property to multiple different people. What you're telling the seller is this is part of my inspection. What you're telling the buyer is FYI, you're going in under inspection. All questions come back to me. Now, this doesn't, you don't have to lie to them and tell them, like, I own the property if you don't own it yet. You can explain to them that this is a transaction where you're in the middle. Transparency is, typically key. The only thing you're trying to really do is separate them from speaking to the actual seller so they don't find out how much they're paying.
Mhm. Yeah, it makes sense.
I was saying I would just bring in somebody else into the mix, typically boots on the ground,
Mhm.
or if there's an agent involved that you found it through, or any, just got to be somebody physically in this particular case. If you're going to go either way to take your own photos and videos and the buyer is sight unseen as well, then it shouldn't be an issue.
Makes sense. Yeah, yeah. That sounds perfect. I will conclude with saying, uh, thanks a lot for your time. I think that's all I had. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add, bring up? And yeah, just share if you wanted to.
No, I mean, listen, I think we covered a lot of the bases. If anybody has any questions related to double closings or transactional lending, so, kind of being on either side of the table, I can tell you there's a lot of benefits from this. You get exposure to a lot of deals being a lender, transactional lender. If you are not active in the real estate space and you want to make some money without owning property, rub shoulders with somebody who is doing transactional lending because it's a great way to make some income in this business without having to participate fully. If you are looking at a ton of transactions on a regular basis and for whatever reason it's one that doesn't happen to close, now you've got a first seat, like you got front row seats, first dibs on that transaction, because essentially, if it's about to
Yeah,
fall apart, you can kind of make the efforts to buy it yourself. So it's kind of like dual purpose, and that's why one of my vehicles is compound lending. It's kind of like during the gold rush, sell shovels instead of search for gold, because everyone's going to come to you when they need a shovel. And if they're coming to you with a shovel, that means that when they find gold, they might come buy more shovels. So you can join them and participate in the mining of gold. And that's kind of the
for sure.
concept behind that. So part of this ecosystem that I've created and I embed in other people's business, this growth strategy is it's multi-pronged. It's not just one directional. We're not just doing one thing to help your business grow or make a ton of money. We're actually trying to make some money, plant more seeds, make more money from that, and then preserve it at the bottom. Because it's one thing to make a lot of money in any field, but it's another thing to keep it. So preservation is huge. The best way to preserve your money is definitely through real estate. I will debate against anybody that tells you that there's another safe vehicle that is tax friendly, tax transferable, 1031 exchange. If you don't know what that is, that's a topic for another day, but I'm happy to talk about that as well. And that's just the benefit of investing here in the US. And it gives you an explanation as to why being a previous successful real estate investor in Canada led me to the US to transition here, because there's a lot more opportunity, but it's also very much tax friendly and the best place to securitize your wealth, especially in the assets. The GDP is a lot higher. I still have investments in Canada. I still do operations in Canada. So I do invest on both sides of the border. But I could tell you that if I had a preference, my American operations are a lot more fruitful and a lot more tax advantageous, with
Makes
everything
sense.
everything abiding by the laws and not having to skirt around any gray areas. We're using information out of the IRS tax code, the Augusta rule, the 179. And this is all information I'm happy to share with you through my tax attorneys and through my accountants, because I'm not a tax professional. I just take this advice that's been given to me that I've paid money for, and that's something that we continuously practice in our business and will we help other people implement in their business so they can do the same thing.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, it was great having this session with you. There was a lot of value in it, and as always, it was just a lot of golden nuggets in it. And thanks a lot for your time.
And I just want to leave off with this. It's sessions like these, and it's people like you who bring out that purpose and that passion in me. So I am more than happy to do it. I'm grateful for you for provoking me to do these sessions because I get fired up and it's something that's inside of me that it's a flame. And the ancient scripture says to never give up and fan that flame. So that burning
Mm,
desire inside you, that passion is a flame. So how do we grow that flame? We just got to fan the flame to grow that fire. So I want to encourage you to do the same thing. And thank you for encouraging me to continuously pursue my passion and help others. Thank you so much.
thank you very much.